Yet another reason why this is going to happen now. Liam Fox said that Britain has nothing to fear from a no deal with the EU after figures reveal that the UK relies on more trade with the rest of the world, which is what Nigel Farage has said for years. He said it in the Brexit movie. I haven't really been following what he's saying, but I found out now that he's just been saying about things where he's going like, London will remain preeminent after Brexit because everyone's like, oh, it won't be the financial hub of the world. Well, why is New York still like that? That's not in the massive EU structure that's supposedly good and great. He is one of the preeminent guys. The eminent guys that is in Parliament right now trying to push through Brexit, and it's just, this is what's happening now. Like, the no-deal Brexit is now the way to go, because, look what's happening. We went in there, we're leaving, like, the politicians didn't want it, but then they weren't, rightly so, they went, right, we're going to be going there and try and get a good deal on Brexit. They wanted to make it so then it was good for both sides. They wanted to cut the cake in a certain way so then both sides were happy. Theresa May and David Davis, they went in there trying to be nice. The EU put out its artillery and started firing it at the UK. It started demanding us for money when there's absolutely no legal obligation for it. There's nothing in the Lisbon Treaty in Article 50 which says that there should be any sort of money that we have to pay them.
There's nothing in the Lisbon Treaty about a financial settlement at all. This has been pulled out of thin air, and now they're trying to run with it as though it's an established fact. We don't owe them anything. We actually own a share of that place over there. We have given them £185 billion in net contributions over the last 40 years. We'd quite like to have that back.
It says after we leave there will be no further obligations to the leaving country. There is absolutely nothing that we have to do. They're wanting to do it because they know if the UK is seen to leave with a good deal, then that will cause other countries like Italy, which are going to have their election at the latest February next year, where there's not actually Beppe Grillo anymore. It's this guy called like Luigi Di Maio, I don't know, Mayo. Yeah, basically, he's now the leader of the Five-Star Movement in Italy. That's a very interesting thing there. And it will mean that Marine Le Pen would shoot up in the ratings. It would mean that the AfD would shoot up in the ratings. The Five-Star Movement will probably win the elections. This is the end of the EU. But they can't say that they will want us to have a no deal, but they can't force on us to have a no deal. We can just walk away, and they can't do anything. They can't suddenly go, oh no, you can't do that, because as much of the power they have, they still don't have enough power to just stop this from happening. Like, we can just crash out the European Union saying 17.4 million people voted that they did not want to stay like that, and we're saying that there is absolutely no reason why you shouldn't be acting in this manner towards us. We're trying to be nice to you. We tried to cut the cake. We tried to make it so that we could have a good trade deal which will benefit both of us, a tariff-free deal which would mean that there'd be no cliff edge which they're on about, protecting workers' rights, and all of this. They're just playing the hardball. They will not accept the UK leaving, and they will not do any kind of deal with the UK. There's absolutely no way for it to be done. And this whole thing about 2 years it takes to leave the EU. We could have done it in 6 months. Theresa May, she could have gone in there the second she got elected, pushed the Article 50 button, basically, and then went in there and then started talking about trade and started talking about workers' rights and saying, we're not paying you anything. Like, if they weren't being total idiots, the EU, that they are now, we could have gone in there and, it could have been done and dusted by now. It could have been done and dusted. We could be coming to the end of negotiations, but we're not. There's even told that the trade talks might not even begin until next year. It'll be a year and a half since the UK voted to leave the EU, and then there's a whole talk of a transition period. No, just crash out. We rely on more trade from the rest of the world. Those figures they've been around for decades. The Anglo-EU trade is falling. It's falling by the year at a rapid rate. More and more businesses they're trading with China and America and Brazil and India. They're trading with all the countries which have big economies. They're not trading with the European Union. I've seen figures as low as 8% of it. I don't think it's quite that low, but it's not like anywhere near like 40, 30, 20%. In fact, I think it's more like around 10 or 15% of our trade is with the European Union. But all of the businesses in this country have to apply European Union law, even if they don't trade within the EU, even if they're set up to not even have anything to do with the EU, they're set up to trade with America, they're set up to trade with China or whatever. They have to apply European Union regulation. There was one in the Brexit movie, Tate and Lyle.
The European Union is the biggest drag on the competitiveness of our business.
And what precisely are they doing, which is the problem?
Well, you can see behind me on the jetty today that there's no boat here with raw sugar, and that's precisely our problem. The boats that deliver our raw sugar here to London, the sugar on them, the cost of that is inflated by the fact that the European Union restricts who we can buy that sugar from, and on much of the sugar they also charge us import tariffs.
This is not the way to go. I'm sorry, but I'm not going to put the whole of the EU down the drain for the sake of a few jobs in there. The world will want to work. Man is pushed on by competition. If you strip away that competition and say it's only going to be this, then it's like pulling the plug out. There is absolutely no incentive for them to do well because they know it's the only way to actually they know it's their only source, so they can do it well or they can do it absolutely terribly, and they know that as long as they can still get it at a relatively cheap price, it'll be fine. Well, half the time it's not even a relatively cheap price because the price is bumped up by the fact that there's tariffs on the sugar cane, meaning there's less sugar in the market and that they can sell at a higher price because they're a monopoly. This is what's happening. If we walk away from the European Union tomorrow, Theresa May, who just hangs up her EU badge and EU coat and whatever, she says, right, we talk with you guys, we try to cut the cake, we try to make it good for you, but you've clearly shown that you won't do anything that will be in the interest of both your citizens and our citizens, so we're going to leave, goodbye. What would that mean? That would mean that suddenly we have no European Union regulation upon us. We go back to WTO rules. I mean, there's this whole thing about they're going, oh yeah, but what about trade with the world? That means we'll have massive tariffs going into the European Union. How come US goods, Chinese goods, they make their way into the European Union? And plus, I mean, Europe is not the whole world. It's 20% of the world. It is not the whole world. I mean, these figures say that we need more reliance on more trade with the rest of the world. We need lots more for the rest of the world, not this tiny little corner of Europe. If Britain was the only survivor of Europe, if you like, and all those countries died in terms of their economies, then we could still carry on trading with the rest of the world. We'd have huge trade with the US, which I think is our biggest trade partner by far. I mean, even over the European Union, and that gap is widening by the year. It's increasing with China, Australia, Brazil, India. All of these countries are not EU members. They're members of WTO. WTO rules have brought down tariffs around the world, and they're complete enemy of the EU because the EU wants to try and keep it high and keep it high. And the reason why they're protectionist is because they know that it's all part of this massive big project. They know that if they're seen to support the jobs there, like a company comes up to them and say, oh yeah, can you slap on a tariff on competitors, like as I said, like the sugar cane, like the sugar beet producers, the European sugar beet producers, they just go in and they say, oh yeah, can you slap a tariff on the sugar cane? They'll go sure and do that. They'll go support the EU. And imagine that with every single industry.
The European Union is very good at purchasing the loyalty of powerful and articulate interests in all the member states.
When we hear great public institutions, quangos, museums and campaign groups waxing lyrical about the EU, we have to remember the EU gives them vast amounts of our money.
That's why there's a huge chorus of noise for institutions and the school system and all of academia, even the police is going to now, which are absolutely in favour of the European project because they know, because they've had their job protected, and they know that if they suddenly have these strings taken away from them, like these covers over the competition, they know that they'll die. So, the European Union is dying. They don't want us to go, as I said, in part to make it look like that you can't leave the EU without being seriously punished, but also because they're going to lose their second biggest donor. All of the countries that have joined in the last 20 years or so, basically since the Soviet Union broke up, all those countries, traditionally, they have a lot weaker economies than Western Europe does. That's why the currency has failed, because they're trying to link the Mediterranean companies in Eastern European countries with Western European countries.
They can't save their single currency. It's a doomed project. The north and south of Europe cannot fit together and survive together inside the same economic and monetary union. Had it been Germany, and a few of the northern countries, it might have worked. But this is doomed.
I mean, no business to say that the Euro's failing, because then that'll just lose some support, and they know that. The EU they are in absolute crisis right now. Catalonia, I mean, now they're imposing direct rule because there's been a ruffle in the classroom, and now the headmaster's come in and is imposing a massive detention on these guys. So, Liam Fox, saying we'll leave the European Union by March 2019, I think we just crash out. If Theresa May is going in there and she's trying to keep negotiations on for as long as possible, then that will make the EU look even worse, because that would mean that it looks like that Theresa May has been trying to go on with negotiations for even longer. The main part of negotiations now, like the EU, they're determined that they have to go and talk about how much they're going to pay up before they get onto trade. David Davis, he well knows they're trying to play games, and he's insistent on trying to do that. He should just go there and just say, look, we've tried to cut the cake with you, and you just won't. Because then they'll make the EU look bad, and they know that they can't stop that, and they're trying their hardest to try and push the UK to do it. They're just hoping upon all their might that they can appease the politicians, which are weak as anything nowadays. There's no factors or anything like that. They're just completely weak. They don't know anything. I mean, look at Cameron, who's an absolute weak politician. I mean, if Theresa May goes in there and just does that, then, I mean, she will be a Brexit heroine. All they have to do is just crash out. Because, I mean, there's nothing to fear now. And originally, everybody wanted a deal. They were like, oh, no deal. No deal is going to be terrible. What's not to like about it? As the trade is decreasing year by year with the European Union, and the world is opening up, China opened up, India's starting to open up, Brazil is opening up, the US is getting bigger and bigger, all of the other economies in the world, and even Africa are getting bigger. I mean, there's all these things where you see all these things on the TV going, oh, support water aid, look at poor Woody Wada Wada, she has to go down to the river and collect dirty water, and it's all being polluted by animals and stuff. Because, do you know why? Do you know why those countries are still impoverished? Because the European Union, they can't sell to the European Union, because businesses, they want cheap, like coffee beans, for example. And then we're looking at Malawi, which was even done in geography. They want cheap coffee beans, but the EU imposes huge tariffs on coffee beans, and they can't roast them there and sell them. They have to sell them raw. And then companies like Starbucks and make an absolute fortune out of it. So they can't actually roast them because they can't actually sell it into the European Union. But then with this, and then they can then sell to the UK. They can then sell to us. They can then sell roasted coffee beans. We'll buy them at a very cheap price. They'll get the money back from it. They can then pull out of this cycle of poverty. These companies won't have to go in there, like all these water aid like charities and stuff like that. They won't have to go in there and try and help people that way. They need to focus at the key point of the problem. They shouldn't just provide somewhere there. They shouldn't go to the end of the problem and then try and sort it at that end, because then it will just come back. They need to tackle it at the base of the problem there. But I mean, that's kind of to the point. But we can open up for the rest of the world, like we did back in the Industrial Revolution. I mean, there's the things about the empire, some we may agree with this, some you may not. But look at the size of the British economy. It absolutely boomed. It was completely capitalist. Everybody was selling stuff. You could buy something, like the trade was opening up, but the ships were getting faster and faster. There was massive entrepreneurs. There's entrepreneurs there taking a gamble, thinking they could make something out of it. They were rewarded for success and punished for failure. This is the sort of thing which pulls people out of poverty. I've heard a figure where it's actually in India. Was it India or China? I can't remember. But it's pulled about 300 million people out of poverty. This is what capitalism has done, and the European Union is not capitalist in any way, shape or form. It is protectionist. It is actually close to the USSR because it's not democratic at all. The only reason they set up the parliament was so then that people wouldn't shout at them saying it wasn't democratic, which it isn't anyway. So they thought they could get away with that, but that's definitely failing now because people are realizing and they know that they can't find any other way to do it. They're just trying to keep quiet about it, and they're trying to shout about Britain paying $1 billion, tens of billions of euros in divorce bills. So they don't want countries to leave. Cameron, he thought that he could shoot UKIP's Fox and go, we're going to have a referendum, blah, 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 blah. He thought that everybody would vote for the status quo, but Farage goes in there, absolutely fires everybody up about it. People realise, it's no wasn't a massive amount of people realising what's going on, and then it was won. And then Cameron went, what do I do now? And then he resigned. There was this whole dilly-dally with Theresa May coming in, doing nothing for months and months and months, and then pushing Brexit, and then starting Brexit, and then calling an election which he failed on because the Tories have this absolutely narrow-minded view that any time they're going up in popularity, they can then win it by an absolute huge majority, which is not going to happen in this day and age. I think I might do another video on that at some point, because you can't get majority governments anymore. I mean, it's been proven. I mean, when was the last landslide majority? Was Tony Blair in 2001. And that was even a decline from his huge majority in 1997, when I think he got the largest majority in the history of the UK. He had 418 seats or something ridiculous. But it's not going to happen. I mean, as it's been saying, there's absolutely nothing to fear at all. How have the US, how has China, how has Brazil, Australia, and now India, how are their economies absolutely booming? Because they are not strapped into this anti-democratic superstate called the European Union. China is actually a different form, because they're a success in a different way, in the fact that they're just trying to push forward capitalist projects. And it was this one guy in the 70s that left his legacy that if you open up your country to the world, then you can become a quite big success, and they're actually still communist. So they're the one exception to that. But every other country in the world, apart from the odd few, are completely capitalist. Jeremy Corbyn just wants to go back to the socialist days. He wants to go back to the 70s, because they were massively great times, weren't it? 26% inflation, 84% top rate of income tax. Yeah, that was great. He wanted to become like Venezuela. He's been killing his opposition. Yeah, you really want to go to that? Because that's what the EU is. That's why he supports the European Union. But the strength of the UK economy as it approaches Brexit was also highlighted in a World Bank report, which showed that it is the 7th best place to do business, even under EU rules. Britain was 13 places above its main EU rival Germany, while the stagnant French economy was in a lowly 31st position. Britain is doing better than ever at selling services, financial, passengers, pensions and insurance. The rest of the world, with overall trade, with a surplus of almost 21 billion, with 38.5 million total exports in the second quarter of 2017. This is what people don't get. They are completely anti-globalist. I am all for globalization, because it means that all of the countries in the world, their economies, like this whole thing where they went, it was back in the 50s, or we should tie our economies together. That was in a pre-globalized world. Now globalization has taken place, and it's shown that the US economy is highly linked with the Chinese economy. The Chinese economy is making large amounts of its manufacturing for the Western market, mainly the US and Europe. India now is starting to sell lots of financial services as well, not on the same scale that we are. But I mean, look at our mining industries. Like when Thatcher, she just moved everything into the private sector. Yes, there was a lot of job losses, but that she was saying that, look, if we're going to succeed in the world, we're going to have to change. We can't stick with all of these old industries. Sure, we can go back to them. If there's enough belief, we can go back and we can rebuild all of these industries if we can sell them at a cheap enough price. But we have to do what Britain does best, which is now entrepreneurs coming up with designs, having investment in other countries and factories in other countries, and in financial services, London being the second biggest one in the world after New York, and it's biggest in Europe and the whole of the Eurasian continent. It's huge. You can't strap yourself to an economy which is, the French economy is starting to stagnate because they don't have this huge financial sector that we do. France is becoming stagnant. I mean, why do you think Le Pen was getting so popular? Because they knew that if they had a few more years under Macron, I mean, Macron's going to destroy France before long, because he wants to further integrate the European Union. And then you just look at these videos on YouTube and everyone's going, oh well, the EU's great, I'm fully European. And I'm saying, yes, what are you? Oh, you're middle class, are you? Do you have to live down in the real world where Islamic immigration and immigration from all these countries is affecting your lives? Do you have to live in the world where you have a business, where the EU has so many regulations that it's going to stifle you? Do you live in a world where you can only trade with Europe? No, they don't live in that world. They live in this absolute bubble. They live in a bubble where they don't know what the real world is like. Why do you think Farage was so popular? He went out to the real world. He went and traded metals as a stockbroker in London. These people, they don't have any clue. Most of the politicians, they just don't have any clue how to run the country to what the people want. Because They didn't go out into the real world. They went and got university degrees the second they came out of school, and then they went to Eton. They live in this bubble, and the EU is an even higher tier of that. The EU is where everybody goes.
The reason why all the major political parties are massively in favour of Europe is because when their careers are blown out of the water here, they're stumbling around for a job. No commercial organisation is going to hire them. They know what a collection of shits they are, right? There's only one place that will hire them.
The EU is not against the world. Everyone, you hear these people say...
Do you seriously think we can strike a better trade deal with a superpower like China representing 60 million as opposed to 500 million? It makes no sense.
Why do we have to fight China? We can work with China. We can fight them with what we do best. We don't fight them with what they do best. That's not how competition works. You fight with the things that you do best, and then that balances out the economy. China produces most of the stuff in the world. Britain is a huge design, entrepreneuring and financial centre of a country. It's not rocket science. Yes, there will be manufacturing in other places scattered about everywhere, but you don't try and protect industry. If you try and protect it by stifling out competition, then it's bad for everybody. It's bad for the consumer, it's bad for the competition which has now been stifled, it's bad for those countries which can no longer sell into the European Union states without massive tariffs being put on them, and in the end, it raises up the price for the consumer anyway.
It adds between 10 and 20% to the cost of food.
So, when we're outside the EU, watch food prices, fuel prices, watch them all fall, because the tariffs will no longer be in place. As you know, the champagne can only be made in Champagne in France or whatever that's it, like the original time where it's made. It can only be made there, nowhere else. It's not allowed to, because European Union regulation. Cornish pasties, they're not allowed to be made outside of Cornwall either. This is the sort of stupid thing that the EU does, and this is why getting out with no deal is better than having a bad deal. Nigel Farage said it constantly, didn't he?
I coined the phrase in the referendum, no deal is better than a bad deal. No deal is better than where we are now, paying up to £10 billion every single year into an organisation that overregulates many of our industries, takes away our fishing waters and bans us from making our own trade deals with other parts of the world.
Even if we're not trading with the EU, we just fall onto WTO rules and we have to try and get in via these tariffs. Anglo-EU trade is falling because businesses, they're trying to open up. They're looking away from Europe. They know what's happening in Europe. They're looking away. They're looking to China, India, Australia, the US. I mean, even blooming Africa now is starting to pull out of poverty. It's expected within the next few decades it could begin to finally start pulling out of poverty. It's not rocket science. UK stock market for services was the US, which bought 8.4 billion worth of services to the US from April to June, far more than the 2.5 billion pounds sold to Germany, the second largest market. The UK services sector overall recorded a trade surplus of £101.1 billion last year, with their exports worth over 250 billion. 2/3 of total exports go to countries outside the European Union. 2016-2017, the UK also attracted more foreign direct investment projects than ever before, with more than 2,200 projects, a 2% increase on the previous year, 75,000 jobs created, 33,000 safeguarded, equivalent of 2,000 per week. Exports are growing, strength to strength. UK services in high demand across the globe, nearly 2/3 going to markets outside the EU, such as Japan and Saudi Arabia. It holds a prosperous trading future for the UK, and whilst the dynamic experience team on the international economic partner will continue to spread the ground for future free trade deals and support more British business that want to export. As countries, they don't want to be under the EU anymore. They want to get out of the EU. They want to return to capitalism. Because, I mean, look at the Eastern European countries. They lived under communism for decades, and they suddenly come out there thinking, oh, let's join the EU. And now they're experiencing the same thing. Most of the people are still alive. They're still alive from when they were living under communist rule. And they don't want this to be happening again. They realise it. And then it was Andrew Marr, and he was saying that...
If you look at the statements of the Prime Ministers of Hungary, Poland, Slovakia and the Czech Republic, they make Nigel Farage sound like a Foreign Office diplomat.
It's just so bad, and they don't want to be ruled under communism, because that's pretty much what it is. They want to be capitalist again. They wanted to actually govern themselves and be capitalist. They didn't want to be in a European Union, which they thought was just a trading bloc. They didn't want to be in a European Union then that will completely mess up their whole way of living that they did not want to be living under again, which was they've been living under it for decades. They've been living under it since like the 40s up until the 90s. That's 50 years. That's some people's lifetimes that they were ruled under communism by, and there's many people that are still old enough to remember that. And they don't want it to be they don't want it to happen again. So he's warning that any introduction of impediments to trade or investment across the European continent would disincentivize global investors from investing in Europe, which is true because investors, they're not going to invest in something which is not going to make them returns. They're not going to invest in something which is full of regulation and they'll put in more costs than they'll get back. So the more regulation that the European Union has, the less the investors are going to be attracted to Europe, and investors are they're going to be flooding in to the UK. They're all going to be flooding into London. They're all going to be flooding in, taking advantage of the fact that we're a capitalist nation wanting to trade with the world, trying to reconnect with our Commonwealth friends that we completely abandoned in favour of this European project, which was going to fail anyway, and we need to reconnect with them. That will mean that then it will help them develop as well if we can help them. Also, the British Overseas Territories, which have seen little development because they've had little funding from the British government, it will mean that they can actually get a bit more funding because if the UK government gets in more taxes from the fact that more people are moved here, they've got actually houses they can live in. They've not got this absolutely uncontrolled immigration that's just flooding in here. This is what can happen. We need to get out of the EU now. We should just crash out, because it's looking increasingly likely that the European Union are just going to mess around. They don't care. They don't care if they want us to stay, and if they push so hard that they'll just go, oh, we'll just stay instead of paying it. And then they're thinking, oh, we can't go with no deal because then that will mean that we won't get voted in next election. Yes, it will, because people will say, look what they've done for the country. They finally bucked up their ideas and gone, look, the European Union doesn't work. It's frustrated by the fact the European Council is not given the green light to move on from the Dawes Bill and question of British financial settlement and discuss the future trade relationship. Well, they won't. They won't move on from that. They won't move on from that because they know if they don't punish them, then Britain will look good when it actually leaves the European Union, and then they will look bad and more countries will be incentivised to leave the European Union, and it will just bring that whole project crashing down. Boris Johnson says that Britain's recruiting 50 more diplomats to beef up the country's bilateral influences in the European Union after Brexit. So he's basically going, we're leaving and we're going to get more people to get on our cause, so then the more countries will leave and bring it crashing down. So isn't that just great?